Hello, everyone. This is Pamela Brewer welcoming you to this edition of M.E.S.H. And as you know, M.E.S.H is the place where every week I talk to you about things having to do with your mental, emotional, and social health. And also, I have been reminding you that trying to be a mind reader or to accept the role of mind reader is not a good plan. And the way to deal with that is to ask questions. And that, of course, is what I am here to do today. I am very happy to introduce to you today's guest, Carrie Ann Cleveland. Carrie is the director of Cleveland Family Counseling. Carrie, welcome to M.E.S.H.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Dr. Brewer. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Carrie, I'm going to tell you what I understand about your clinical expertise. And if there's something that you can add, I am very happy for you to do that. My understanding, though, is that you are a licensed marriage and family therapist, and you're licensed, I believe, in California, Washington State, and
And
is it
Georgia.
Georgia?
Mhm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
kind of crossing the map a little bit. And you are a certified high conflict divorce coach, which might be a conversation for another day. But I really was intrigued by that because we certainly know that divorces can be very much high conflict. But you also talk about really being skilled in dealing with all forms of trauma. And you identify a range of different kinds of traumas that people experience. It can be financial, emotional. There are unfortunately many legs, if you will, to the trauma experience. I want to talk to you about gaslighting, and from a trauma perspective, first of all, what is gaslighting and is it traumatizing?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, in my private practice, I deal mainly with narcissistic abuse. And one of the hallmarks of narcissistic abuse is coercive control. One of the underpinnings of that is gaslighting. But gaslighting shows up in, as you said, in many contexts at work, in our family relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, just anywhere you can think there's gaslighting as it can and will be present. To me, I kind of define gaslighting as when somebody is trying to make you believe, think, or feel in a way that is not based on your reality.
So that's kind of scary. Let me go back though to your comment about narcissistic abuse. I want you to sort of give us a thumbnail sketch of what that means and how, if at all, that is different from gaslighting, or is gaslighting a component of it?
Yeah, I would say gaslighting is a component of narcissism. So, narcissistic abuse really shows up as a control, an overarching reach for power and control, no matter what the stakes. Um, we all kind of think of the classic narcissist, I think, as like the gorgeous, handsome movie star who's wealthy and feels very entitled and has lots of charisma. But that's only one of many types of narcissism. That's the most visible kind. But narcissistic abuse is overt and covert. It can show up in lots of different areas. It shows up in the military. It shows up in a lot of different religious leaders. It shows up in our politicians. It actually even shows up in sometimes in a lot of nonprofit spaces. Um, and narcissism is insidious. It is extremely traumatic having to deal with a narcissistic person. In fact, there's a little saying I like. It goes something like, narcissistic personality disorder is the only mental health diagnosis where the person with the disorder remains untreated and everybody around him goes to therapy.
Right. Of course, the
Yeah,
narcissist, there's nothing wrong with somebody who's a narcissist. They're completely fine. Everybody else is the problem.
exactly. Yeah.
And it's scary because yes, I mean the gorgeous movie star, we get that, but you added to that, it can be in a church, it can be in a nonprofit, it can be in any place where people either and this is a question, have positions of control, of power, or believe that they have positions of power.
Yes.
Is it one and the same?
Well, I think for a narcissist, believing that they're in a position of power is more important than whether or not they actually have the power. If they don't have the power inherently through their role, their career, whatever, they will wrest that power from others, often through gaslighting.
Okay. So describe to me, let's say that I am a narcissistic person. How am I hope I'm not, but if I were, I wouldn't be wrong, right? I'd be completely justified. Tell me about my behavior.
If you were a narcissist, what would your behavior look like?
Yes.
Um, Entitled for sure shows up, but that doesn't always look the way we think it does. So entitled is not necessarily the person who's demanding the best table at the restaurant and that sort of thing. Entitled really kind of shows up as that you cannot take accountability and you could never be wrong.
Okay.
So you'll kind of like cut off your nose to spite your face. You'll say things that are objectively incorrect, but you will defend that to the nth degree. um just any sort of manipulation in order to protect your own ego, because narcissists at their core truly are filled with a lot of shame and have very low self-esteem, and so they counteract that by projecting an air of confidence or charisma or charm or intelligence. um, and that mask usually can't stay on for very long. So for the people closest to the narcissist who see behind the mask, those are the ones the narcissist winds up targeting because they can't stand that anybody has seen the truth of who they actually are.
So does that mean that the narcissistic person is aware of his or her own narcissism or no?
Yes and no. So there's ego syntonic and ego dystonic. So for example, ego dystonic would be somebody, for example, who in their 20s develops depression and they can't get out of bed and they feel very sad and they have no motivation to do their hobbies and activities, and they're very much aware that this is not their normal state of being. So it's dystonic to their normal state. Whereas a narcissist, it's ego syntonic, meaning that they truly don't believe there's anything wrong with how they treat others or the demands they put upon other people or the fact that they can't ever acknowledge their mistakes. And that's very much in alignment with their worldview. And they probably think the rest of us who are accountable and honest are just crazy and we're doing life wrong. So in
Mhm.
that way, it's ego syntonic. However, whether conscious or not, at some point, they do understand that their behaviors are not appropriate. And they know this because they're often they show up as one way, let's say at their workplace, because they know if they acted at work the way they act at home, they wouldn't have a job anymore. So obviously, it's intentional and something they can control when they choose to, depending on the environment. I like to say narcissists are very much about impression management. So they might scream at their kids or their wife or their husband, whoever the narcissist is. I use male pronouns a lot as a narcissist, but women and men can have narcissism. But they wouldn't do that in a public setting.
Okay, so they're aware enough to set some limits on themselves in terms of how that behavior shows up.
Right.
How is gaslighting a component of that?
So gaslighting is going to be woven throughout almost every interaction from the time you first meet the narcissist. In a romantic relationship, it actually usually shows up first as what they call love bombing, meaning they show up as, and again, I'm just going to use male pronouns because it is predominantly male, but I recognize that it's male and female. But it would show up with gifts and sending flowers and expensive vacations and, showing up at your doorstep with soup if you happen to get sick and just making you feel like the most important person on earth. But it's too much, too fast, too intense. And oftentimes people don't check their intuition and their gut response because,
Mhm.
we're taught to believe in this Disneyland fairy tale of Prince Charming and happily ever after. So the gaslighting starts right from the beginning, but gaslighting doesn't always look and feel bad. If it did, we would never go past the first date, right?
So if somebody is showing up on my doorstep constantly with all these wonderful things, there's no way I'm gonna think I'm being gaslit. I'm gonna think that I am being loved to pieces, even though it had occurred within the last 30 minutes of our meeting.
Usually, yeah. And that's why we allow it to continue.
And how does it continue? How does it start to grow?
So there's an arc to it. one of the first things that people generally notice when they, look back in hindsight 2020 is minimization. So after the sort of honeymoon phase of the love bombing, you might start to notice that you're getting little jabs. And like if you bring up to your partner, you said XYZ and that really hurt my feelings. I'm wondering if we can talk about it. And instead of the person being accountable, they'll say, "You're too emotional. It was just a joke. You make everything such a big deal," that
Okay.
kind of a thing. So already your feelings are getting minimized, and then you start to feel like, "Wow, maybe I am overreacting. Why am I taking this such a big deal?" So you're already starting to doubt yourself.
And how does that grow? I mean, do I as I'm starting to doubt myself, does a friend say, "What's the matter with you? Are you kidding?" Or do I keep it a secret? Do I say nothing?
Most people keep it a secret. At this stage it's pretty minor, sort of trivial things. We generally tend to want to protect the image of our partners to our friends and family. So
Okay.
we're not going to tell them about every little silly fight we had about, who was going to pick the restaurant we went to dinner at that night. So at this phase we generally aren't telling other people. Yeah.
Is there a point at which the gaslighting becomes in addition to sort of breaking down, the harms person's sense of him or herself, is there a point at which it can become financially dangerous, socially dangerous? Is there danger involved, potential danger involved?
Absolutely. Yeah. The more that your life gets intermingled with this person, the more dependent you become on them, the harder it is to separate and, have your own separate lives again. If you have children with this person, if you buy a house with this person or intermingle finances with this person, in another context, it might look like you've gone into business with this person. You guys pooled your resources and developed a
Mhm.
business that, you're both reliant on. Um, in some cases, like in a medical context, gaslighting might look, and this especially happens to women, is that we're told we're overreacting to our symptoms, we're being, hysterical or exaggerating, and we don't seek a second opinion. And you might have a lump in your breast that goes undiagnosed because your doctor minimized it. So yeah, there's health, financial, relational, all it can affect you in all kinds of different ways.
So what's the difference between, I'm having a conversation with somebody and I don't know, I express a view that the person I'm talking with disagrees with, and they tell me that I'm overreacting. What's the difference between, "That's just crazy, you're overreacting," and, "We just really are having a difference of opinion." Does it look different?
Yeah, absolutely. So, differences of opinion are amazing, right? And I think it's one of the things that makes our country great is that we're allowed in most of the time to speak our differences of opinion. And through that dialogue, both parties should come away feeling heard and seen and understood, even if there isn't an ultimate agreement. However, if you're having this conversation with a narcissist, you'll notice right away their tone changes, their physicality or demeanor changes. They might start moving closer to you, being a little bit physically intimidating. They'll start doing something called DARVO, which stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. So instead of saying on topic and discussing whatever it is that we're having this opinion about, they're going to deny that they have any wrongdoing or any culpability or deny any accountability for whatever the issue is, attack you, and then paint themselves as the victim. So now we're not talking about the thing we were originally talking about.
Right.
Now this person is in the defensive position having to justify and defend their actions. So it's kind of like when you play with a cat with a laser pointer, and they jump from spot to spot. That's what the narcissist does. So when they have an undefensible position, which oftentimes they do, they just move the laser pointer over here. So now we're talking about this other thing instead of the action or the words that they just put out there that are undefensible.
Is there a way to win this battle? Can I stay in this relationship and it be healthy?
Yes, you can stay in the relationship. It wouldn't be healthy by my definition.
Okay.
Um, I primarily work within the context of high conflict divorce. And so the narcissist usually does not seek me out. It's usually the other partner. And we talk through the steps. Some of these people have been married 20, 30, 40 years. They have kids. They don't want to start over. Their finances are commingled. One might have been a stay-at-home parent and doesn't have a work experience to go back onto. And so they might choose to stay. And then we just do a lot of work about being really clear on what that's going to look like, because the pros of being in a relationship with a narcissist is they are highly predictable. So if you can predict
Mm.
what their reaction is going to be, you can sort of circumnavigate certain situations, and you can learn how to kind of back out of them or deflect the conversation. A lot of that comes through yellow rock or gray rock communication. So gray rock is where you try to be as interesting and exciting as a gray rock conversationally. And then yellow rock is the same thing, but this is more for high conflict divorces. You want, knowing that all your documents may be read by a judge. If you were to email your ex, you would want to put just a little bit of sunshine in there so you don't come off as robotic, which could read as hostile or high conflict. So examples I like to give, if you're going to stay with the narcissist, would be something like, you're having dinner and you don't want to provoke a fight. So you might say, gee, honey, did you know that the neighbors painted their mailbox red? Or I happen to notice that Trader Joe's has changed their hours and they're closing at 9 p.m. tonight. Just very factual statements that cannot be disputed, that are not going to lead to an emotional outburst or trigger any big feelings in the narcissist.
And then can that be a way to deflect what might feel like an oncoming challenge?
I don't know that it would work to deflect the challenge. I feel like once most narcissists feel challenged, they have to ride that train to the end. It's an emotional release for them.
So there's no way that somebody's coming at me full blast. There's no way that I can say, "Gee, honey, Trader Joe's." That's not gonna work. They're gonna keep coming after me.
Yeah, probably the Trader Joe's analogy won't work.
Okay.
Uh, what I have found to be somewhat helpful is to validate the narcissist's statement or feeling of, I understand that you feel, or I hear you saying XYZ. So acknowledge their statement and then just end the conversation with something very simple like, I feel differently, or that's not my perspective, or my recollection is different. But we're not going to get into a debate about who is right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm curious, if I say, "I get what you're saying," and I reflected back and it's an accurate reflection, but I close that with, "That's not how I see it." Is the narcissist gonna stop there, or is he or she gonna try to push?
Oh, they'll try to push
Okay,
for sure. But
okay.
it's kind of like, let's say you have a kid who's having a temper tantrum at the grocery store because they want a candy. If you buy them the candy after 5 minutes of tantruming, you've just taught them that, oh, if I tantrum long enough, I'm going to get the candy,
Hmm,
right? So when you're in one of these sort of verbal cycles with a narcissist, you're basically training them, just like you would train a 2-year-old. I
gotcha.
am not going to engage. This is not going to give you the narcissistic fuel that you're looking for right now, which is my reaction. I'm just going to stay neutral and I'm going to say, I recall things differently. And if I say that over and over again, eventually they're going to learn they can't bait me into a fight.
So, clearly, this is a
Mm.
complex situation. In the couple of minutes, literally, that we have left,
Yeah.
what can folks do? Can people be in touch with you, or are there resources that you would like to recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. I do have my private practice. I operate, as you said, in Washington, Georgia, and California. Through my coaching business, I can see clients worldwide. So that's I'm accessible to everybody. But I am just one person, and there is not enough time in the day. So I offer the following resources. Anybody who's heard of Dr. Ramani Deversala, she's sort of a well-known expert on narcissism, and she has all sorts of YouTubes and TED Talks and books she's written. She's a great resource. Within the context of high conflict divorce, I recommend Tina Swithin at One Mom's Battle. Her website also has lots of resources. Um, Obviously, just go see a therapist if for help at any point. If you're communicating with a narcissist, via email or like in a business document, something like that, there's this great website I love called M.E.S.H, which is AIMEESAYS. And there's a free version and a paid version, and you can, just talk to Amy just like you were talking to a human. It's an AI, and she will give you responses and help you through it on the emotional side as well. Um, but really, it starts with yourself. You have to know your truth. You have to name the tactic when you're seeing it. I know I didn't cover all of them today, but there's
Yes.
DARBO, accusations, insinuations, and allegations, projection, weaponized incompetence, um,
So
just being
there's
able
a
to
lot.
name it first. Yeah.
Is there do you have a website or an email address if folks want to be in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is clevelandfamilycounseling.com, and my email is carrieann@clevelandfamilycounseling.com.
And if you would just spell Carrie Ann for us?
Yes, CARRIEANN, and Cleveland is just like the city.
Terrific. Carrie, I have to thank you so much. I am thinking that high conflict coaching might be a follow-up conversation for us to have, but again, for another day. Thank you
I would love
so
that.
thank you so much for joining me and for really giving our listeners a lot to think about. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And folks, thank you so much for joining me again on this edition of M.E.S.H. I want you to remember that I'm here every Wednesday. There is a program available to you. And assuming that you've heard something that you care about, I'm going to ask you to share it with someone else who you care about. And I'll see you next week. You take care.